And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 15. Starting out with a really interesting card here, Faces of the Past, 2 and a blue enchantment. Whenever a creature dies, tap all untapped creatures that share a creature type with it, or untap all tapped creatures that share a creature type with it. So at first glance, it would appear this is a card you would want to play in a creature type changing deck or tribal deck or something like that. And certainly that can be the case. I would say it might even be worth it to put this in a deck where you want to be untapping, say, your commander. And when any other creature dies of that particular type, whether it be yours or your opponent's, remember, this isn't just your creatures. When any creature dies on the board during the game, you can choose to either tap or untap, and now I have an opportunity to untap my commander, right? So Arcanus the Omnipotent, of course, a card I bring up all the time because it just has a great tap ability. It is a wizard. And of course, wizard is a popular creature type in the game of Magic. And if any wizard happens to die, whether it be yours or your opponent's, you get to untap your commander and use it again, right? I think you could just throw this card in any deck. If you are in a tapping or untapping theme, it would work. But you have complete control over this. Against any other tribal deck, this is fantastic, right? Your opponent's playing a goblin deck. All you have to do is kill one of their goblins on their turn before they attack, and this will trigger, and you'll just decide, hey, I think I'm going to tap down all goblins, and you will tap down their entire team, right? You can actually use this as a pillow fort type of effect that way. As the game goes on, whenever any creature dies, this will trigger, and you will just look at the board and decide, do I want to tap all those creatures of that creature type, or do I want to untap, whichever benefits you the most. Next up, Eyes of the Wisent, 1 and a green, Kindred Enchantment Elemental. Whenever an opponent casts a blue spell, during your turn, you may create a 4/4 green elemental creature token. That's a pretty good payoff for a 2-mana enchantment, and it's pretty obvious where you want to be using this. This is one of those situations where you're just a person who hates all the counter spells that are being played all the time. Of course, that's where you're going to get the most triggers off of this. Your opponent counters your thing, you get a 4/4 elemental token out of it. That's not bad. I mean, it's probably not as good as allowing your spell to resolve, but at least it's something, right? So this is a very specific card. You know, obviously there are other situations where your opponent might be casting blue spells on your turn. Maybe they're playing a Nimrus deck, stuff like that, where it's likely they'll be casting spells on your turn that are blue, but mostly this is sort of anti-counterspell tech. If you're one of those guys that hates playing against counters, it might be worth trying this out in your deck. Next up, an enchant creature enchantment, 4 and a red aura. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. Now that doesn't seem great, obviously. Okay, 5 mana to get this effect, not super good. Throwing 2 damage around in a commander game isn't super scary, especially not for 5 mana. But obviously the best place for this is if your commander or the creature you're enchanting to has death touch, because this is enchanted creature, deals 2 damage to that target. So if your enchanted creature has death touch, it just becomes whenever you attack, destroy target creature. That's definitely worth it, in my opinion. So if your commander is red and has death touch, I mean, a Prosper is a red commander that's death touch. Funny enough, that's not a commander you plan on attacking with much, but just the off chance that I can swing with my commander and kill one of my opponent's creatures, that's not bad. But any other death touch theme, if you happen to be in red, this seems like a great fit. Or if your commander has death touch, I think it actually is worth it. Next up, Excavation, very unique card, 1 and a blue enchantment. I got a lot of enchantments in this episode. Pay 1 and sacrifice a land to draw a card. However, any player may activate this ability. Pretty funny card in a commander game, of course, because anyone can use it. Obviously great if you're in a theme where you want to be sacrificing your lands in blue. Of course, that doesn't happen very often. I myself happen to have a deck where I'm using this card because I have an Azorius deck where I am sacrificing lands. I would say that's kind of rare. It is good maybe in a deck where you are just putting lots of lands into play already. Like, I think it is worth putting this in a Tatyova deck. I know you don't really need the card draw there, but because you're already putting tons of lands into play to draw cards, now you can sacrifice them to draw cards as well. Like later in the game, I got lots of lands lying around. My commander's died a few times. I can't get it back out into play. I'll just start sacrificing all these extra lands to draw cards. That seems all right. It also can entice your opponents to sacrifice their own lands, which can be a use for this as well. Next up, a card I have never seen in a commander game before, and I'm actually surprised I have, an Exoskeleton. 1 in a green enchantment aura enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards? Why have I never seen this in a commander game before? It seems pretty darn good. 2 mana enchantment that's going to give your creature a huge buff. The number of creature cards in all graveyards, obviously early in the game that's not going to be great, but later in the game it could be incredible. Again, in specific scenarios where you have buddies who are playing Marin decks or Sidisi decks, or obviously any deck that might have lots of creature cards in the graveyard, it's going to be extra good. Maybe you're in one of those decks, right? Maybe I'm playing a Sidisi deck and I can just throw Exoskeleton on my commander because I plan on having lots of creatures in my graveyard. I do want to be attacking with my commander. Why not make it huge and force my opponents to block it or take a bunch of damage, right? I think this card deserves a little more attention in the commander format. Keeping on the enchantment theme here, Eye of Singularity, 3 and a white world enchantment. When Eye of Singularity enters, destroy each permanent with the same name as another permanent except for basic lands. They can't be regenerated. Whenever the permanent other than a basic land enters, destroy all other permanents with the same name. They can't be regenerated. I've mentioned this card a few times on my channel before. It is a world enchantment. If you're not familiar at all with how world enchantments work, go check out my video talking about world enchantments specifically. It's doing the same name thing, so of course it's not very good in the commander format, right? There is the unique scenario where your opponents all have like a soul ring in play, and you play this and all the soul rings get destroyed. That can happen, but as I have mentioned in many videos previous, why cards like this are good is because of tokens. They work really good against tokens. I have this in a deck of mine. I've had it in there forever. It's always handy. I have said so many times before, tokens are so rampant in the commander format now, there will never be a situation where this is a dead card. It's not going to happen, okay? I seriously doubt in a 4-player commander game in today's meta, you will ever come across a game where someone's not cranking out tokens in various forms. I played this against my Patron's Kazul deck, and that's cranking out Ogre tokens. I play this, I destroy all the Ogre tokens they already have, and then going forward, they can only essentially have one, right? When this thing initially enters the battlefield, it will destroy everything with the same name, but then going forward, you essentially can only have one of those things in play, right? Legend rules everything. Other than basic lands, obviously. So now I can swing at that Kazul deck with my entire team, and he can basically create one Ogre. I mean, every other Ogre that gets created is going to destroy the one that came before it. So only one Ogre will be existing. Obviously, Treasures is the big one here. Again, with a Smothering Tithe in play, your opponent will only ever have one treasure in play. I can wheel and everyone draws 7 cards and they're only going to get 1 treasure token because they'll all destroy each other. Really great tech against a token theme in pretty much any variation. Another enchantment here, Familiar Ground, 2 and a green enchantment. Each creature you control can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Just a pretty good enchantment for having your creatures, I guess, not be able to be double blocked, essentially, right? If that's a concern of yours. Where this gets particularly good, though, is in the situation where your creatures have menace. If you have a green commander with menace, I don't know how many there are in that situation, or if you're just planning on having a lot of creatures in your deck with menace, what this does is it makes your creatures unblockable because, of course, menace means your creature can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures, but essentially that means it can't be blocked by 1 creature, and Familiar Ground says your creatures can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So those 2 things combined make it so that your creatures can't be blocked at all. This is a green way to essentially make your menace creatures unblockable. The last enchantment I promise that I will be talking about in this video, Fanatical Devotion, 2 and a white enchantment. Sacrifice a creature to regenerate target creature. That is it. That is all. Pretty great card, I think, in a lot of different situations. If I'm just getting board wiped, again, obviously not the exile board wipe. As I say, regenerate is an underrated ability in the format. It doesn't work against exile, but it will work against damage and destroy. And if someone's just casting a board wipe that destroys all creatures, not a Wrath of God, of course, because that doesn't allow regeneration, but pretty much anything else, I can just sacrifice one of my creatures because, of course, they're going to die anyway to regenerate another one. If I have 4 creatures in play, I can sacrifice sacrifice 2 of those creatures to regenerate the other 2, right? It essentially allows you to keep half your creatures when someone casts a board wipe. It is also a great sack outlet, right? This is a free sack outlet. I can just sacrifice creatures as much as I want to regenerate target creature. You can even target your opponent's creatures here, right? It is a really versatile card and a pretty great sack outlet as well. Speaking of sacrificing and enchantments, but now we're moving on to creatures. Faith Healer is an incredibly unique card in the format. 1 and a white human cleric 1/1. Sacrifice an enchantment. You gain life equal to the sacrificed enchantment's mana value. So just a very unique card that I would say probably fits in any deck where you're just playing a lot of enchantments. It's just good value, right? I'm gonna get board wiped anyway. Someone's casting a Bane of Progress, right? All my enchantments are going bye-bye. Why not just sacrifice them and I gain a bunch of life? Maybe someone's trying to exile an enchantment of mine and I don't want it exiled. I'd rather it go to my graveyard so I can get it back. Sacrifice in response, gain some life. I think any enchantment tribal deck, you can throw Faith Healer in just on the off chance that someone tries to destroy any of my enchantments. Just sacrifice in response and get some life out of it, right? Extra good with a couple of different commanders. Tiana Ship's Caretaker, which whenever an aura or equipment goes into your graveyard, you return it to your hand on the end step. So now I can start sacrificing my auras to gain life, and then they just go right back to hand. And of course, similarly, Mazzy True Sword Paladin, really underrated commander, I think, in the format. If you have that deck, similar theme here, where whenever an aura you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can exile it, and then you get to play it again. So I can sacrifice those auras to gain a bunch of life, whether I just need to gain a bunch of life because I'm about to die, and then I can play them again, or maybe I just want to save them again from getting exiled. I'll sacrifice them all and just play them again on my turn. So 2 commanders where I think this card is a fantastic fit as well. Gaining life is underrated in the commander format, in my opinion, and Fangren Marauder is a card that I really think needs to see more play in the format, both because gaining life is underrated, but also because of all those damn tokens in the format, particularly those treasure tokens, right? So 5 and a green, beast 5/5. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you gain 5 life. That's it. You gain 5 life every time any artifact is put into the graveyard. Bane of Progress, I gain 50 life. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. That's likely what you will gain, right? Your buddy's doing a treasure token deck where this is really going to put in an absolute ton of work. Every time they crack one of those treasures, you're gaining 5 life. That's right. This is any player, and this is any kind of artifact, tokens included. Of course, the format is swimming in artifact tokens now. It seems like they come out with a new one every couple of months, and pretty much all of them are sacrificing. And when your opponent does that, or you, I guess, when you do that as well, maybe you're in a food themed deck or something like that, you're going to be gaining 5 life every single time, right? That's really impactful in a commander game, I think. This is also a beast. We just got a new beast commander in Foundations. This is just an easy slot in, right? If you're making that beast deck, throw this guy in there. He'll gain you a ton of life. I promise you. You'll be glad you put him in there. That is it. That is all. 10 more cards you should be putting in your commander decks. You guys let me know in the comments below if you're playing any of these cards already. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.